Good evening. I'd like to call to order the August 28th, 2017 Board of Education meeting. The first item is we need to approve our agenda.
I'll move we approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Tonight, our main order of business, we're going to do interviews of search firms regarding selection of the superintendent. David Cunningham has stepped out of the room for just a moment. So I'm going to make a couple of announcements to the board before he comes back and we get started. At everybody's place tonight, there should have been a sheet that has a set of interview questions for our firms. You'll notice that there's more than 7 questions. We added a couple after feedback from the board this past week. So what we're going to do, I'm going to start with the first question and we'll just go down the line, and then I'll ask number 8 and Jessica will do number 9. I will say, you know, the hope is that the firms will touch on or maybe even really elaborate on some of these things. So if you have a question for a firm that they've pretty well thoroughly answered, if you would like to, you can just say, you know, you already discussed this, but is there anything else you want to add on whatever the topic is? Some of the questions had multiple parts, so maybe they answered part of it but not the other. I'm going to leave it to your discretion to decide how to manage that, but you know, rather than skipping a question or making them answer it again, we could handle it that way. And then I think David just passed out. This was just something I put together. You can use it or not use it, put it in the recycling bin, but I wanted a way to take some notes this evening during the interviews. So does anybody have any questions about the process? Each firm's going to have 20 minutes to present, and then we will ask questions for probably 10 minutes or so. We'll see how long it takes to kind of get through these questions. Any other? Okay, all right. David, did you want to introduce our first interview?
So tonight, we're going to begin with Ray & Associates. Ryan Ray is here, Brenda Dietrich, and Ralph Turan from Ray & Associates. So they'll get started.
All right. Welcome. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you. And that is our clock?
Okay.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay. Hi. My name is Ryan Ray. I'm the president of the firm, Ray & Associates. We're very delighted to be here and happily be here for the presentation and hopefully get a chance to work with you all on your next upcoming search. I'll let my team go ahead and introduce themselves.
So I'm Brenda Dietrich. I'm the recently retired, I shouldn't even say recently now, it's been over a year, retired superintendent of the Auburn-Washburn School District. I've been working with Ray & Associates for the last few years, and the searches that I've done most recently, I did Olathe last year. I've done Rogers, Arkansas, Joplin, Missouri, Bentonville, Arkansas, and I'm currently working with Shawnee Mission.
I'm Ralph Turan, and have about 40 years in public education, predominantly in Kansas, about 29 years in the Wichita Public Schools. I ended up in Wichita as a 10-year-old Cuban refugee thanks to the First Presbyterian Church, and went through that district, all they did for my family in getting us settled. Became a teacher, assistant principal, principal at all levels, assistant superintendent. And I went to Missouri for 10 years as a superintendent in Grandview. I'm currently an interim superintendent in the Kansas City area, and delighted to be working with Ray & Associates.
And a couple of the searches that I've worked on recently, Topeka, Kansas City, Missouri, their search, the state of Hawaii for their national or their state superintendent, as well as Detroit and Cincinnati. So a couple of those that I've worked on in the past year. There is one member of our team that was going to be able to be here, but you guys changed that date on us, and so she was not able to be here, but she will be a part of our team. How many of you know Dr. Gloria Davis?
Know her name.
Dr. Gloria Davis works for us. We actually were the search firm that placed the first female African-American superintendent in the state of Kansas, and that's Dr. Gloria Davis. So she is going to be working on this search with us and as part of our team. So there will be the 4 of us. So we're going to go ahead and start with the slides. We know we don't have much time. The firm is based out of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. We've been in business since 1975. The firm is under sole continuous ownership, never been bought out or reorganized. That's something that none of our competitors can say. Recruiting the nation's educational leaders is our only primary business. So we don't dabble in anything else, strictly finding educational leaders. Associate continuity, we have over 160 associates across the country that help us do searches. And we're lucky enough that we have great associates like Brenda and Ralph that can go ahead and help us on local searches. Most of our associates, in fact, all of them stay with us for a long time. And we work well in groups together. So we are the four of us, imagine Gloria here. We are here to work the search. So we're not going to be here and then you'll have a whole nother team. So who you have in front of you today is who will be working your search for the long haul. So diversity. We have a diverse pool, or not pool, but team right here that's going to help you as well. We place over 40%, 40% of our associates are women or minorities. And then we actually place more women or minorities than any other search firm in the country. We wear that as a badge of honor on our sleeve. So diversity is very, very important to us. In fact, we work well with NAPSE, which is the National Alliance of Black School Educators. We also work well with ALICE, which is the American Latino Administrators. And we actually go to their national conventions and recruit there, okay? We also work and go to national organizations such as AASA and NSBA to go ahead and help you recruit candidates. So the pool of candidates, this is something that we're really, really proud of, is our average number of completed candidate application files is 70. That's an amazing number, and they're viable candidates, all 70 of them. And we do that through our 160 associates across the country really hitting the pavement. So once we go ahead and get your profile of who you seek in the next superintendent, we're going to go out there and say, go aggressively recruit. Because you want a superintendent that has a good job now, not one that's reading the want ads. So that's our job, to go out and recruit through our associates as well as our presentations and conventions. So a little bit about the process.
So this is the process, kind of in a nutshell. It's just a diagram that kind of shows you what we do. One of the first things that we'd want to do is meet with each individual board member and talk about what you seek in your next superintendent, what qualities and characteristics. Then, as you can see here, I'll talk a little bit more about profile development. Ryan talked to you about how we aggressively recruit candidates. Our candidate pool, that's all those applications that we receive, we vet those candidates against the profile, the kinds of qualities and characteristics you want in your next superintendent and how that person would match what you want. Then we arrange the interviews for the board with the candidates, and we will even be with you if you would like us to be past the time that you offer the contract. We can help you with the contract if you need us to do that and would like us to do that to help negotiate that contract. But we also have an opportunity to work with the board and the superintendent and transition them during that first year so that they're successful, because really what we're looking for you is the best possible match for your community and for your school district and for you, the board, to do the job that you want them to do. So this whole process helps us work with you and define the parameters. The next slide will, if you'll click forward. So we want to meet with each individual board member and talk to you, ask you the same set of questions, what it is you're looking for in your next superintendent, what are the challenges in the school district, what are the strengths of this district, what are maybe some of the weaknesses, what exactly is it that you feel this district needs to be able to move forward into that, that next tier of excellence. Then we'll meet with you and talk about at a special board meeting. Usually it could be a regular board meeting. We'll want to determine the timeline, because we'll want to publish that so everybody knows, your community knows, your staff knows what the timeline is for the search, when you expect to interview and make a decision, what the compensation range might look like for that next superintendent. And then we will also talk to many, many stakeholder groups and come back to you with all the information you gave us, your stakeholders gave us, and from that we will finalize the board profile. The next slide will give you an idea of what we do. We have an opportunity for an online survey that anybody in the community can access off your website. we will ask them the same kinds of things we ask you. What are the top qualities and characteristics in your next superintendent? Then we'll meet with any group in your community that you think is important for us to meet with. When I did Olathe, we had about 23 different groups. In their community, they wanted some faith-based partners to give input. They wanted, of course, all of their staff that was available. If they couldn't come to a stakeholder meeting, they did the survey. We met with principals, assistant principals at the elementary, middle, and high school level. We met with students, which is really one of the most interesting things to do because students are very astute. They know a lot more than you think they know about what's going on in the school district, and they have some very clear ideas about what they want in the next superintendent. And then we take all of those focus groups, parent groups, PTOs, Education Foundation, your higher education partners, whomever you believe is important to receive input from face-to-face in the school district, we'll meet with them. We'll compile that information, including all of your responses, put that into a spreadsheet, and we will come back to you with all of that information so you can see how each group identifies those qualities, what's most important to them. And so from that, we'll build that profile with you. And then we are also willing and able to host open forums if you want to have evening events where parents who couldn't maybe make it to a stakeholder meeting or maybe couldn't access the survey online or forgot to do it can come to a town hall type meeting, and we'll visit with them, talk about the process, the timeline in a very open and engaging way, and then ask for their input as well. So we're very, I think this is one of the things that we do absolutely the best, working with communities, working with the board to be able to identify what is important in your next superintendent.
The recruitment, again, that word aggressively recruit. We go out there and we try to find the candidates based on your profile. So one of the questions you might have is, do you have a database? Yes, we have a database, but we flush it every summer. That way it's fresh. So it's not just digging in there and finding some resume that was handed to us 9 years ago. We actually don't even like to use our database. We just really like to use our recruitment network of associates. We'll go ahead and advertise with venues all over, including websites, social media, Facebook, and Twitter. And we actually average, like I said earlier, 4 to 5 times more applicants than any other firm in the country. So the candidate pool, we'll go ahead and screen to your profile. We'll investigate, vet the candidates using Google, Yahoo, Twitter, Facebook, and all other media sources. You guys don't want any surprises. We don't want any surprises either. So by the time that we go ahead and present those candidates to you, they will be who they say they are. Usually we bring somewhere between 8 to 12 top candidates to the board for consideration. We'll provide you the application as well as something that we do that a lot of other firms don't. We have a video interview. So when you get the piece or the packet of paper on each candidate, you'll actually get a one-way video interview and actually see that individual answer 3 broad-based educational questions as part of the packet. It's a great way. Candidates love it because now they're not just a name on a piece of paper, and board members love it because they can kind of see how they might interview before you paid to have them come in. So it's a great tool. We used to charge for it, now it's free. So, extensive background investigations and internet checks on top candidates. So we'll go ahead and do a professional investigative interview. We'll talk to references. We'll make sure they're in good standing with their state organizations, et cetera, like that. However, when it gets down to maybe your top 2 or 3, we'll go ahead and do the investigative interviews such as bankruptcy, criminal, and all that other kind of stuff that you're going to want to know about. All right? But we're going to do that on your top 2 or 3. So, and then again, like I said, no surprises. We don't want them, and either do you.
So when it comes time for the board to review those top candidate files and to look at the videos, we'll be with you every step of the way. We'll help you with that. We'll compile all the information for you. And then we have a forced consensus matrix, which after you have viewed the videos and gone through the applications, then we'll ask you independently of one another, not as a group, but independently, to rank those candidates that you have just seen their application and their video. And then from that, we will compile your top 5 or your top 6 or 7, And then that will determine who it is as a board you would like to come to invite into interview and face-to-face interviews. And then after each interview, we'll do the same thing. We will do a forced consensus matrix, and we call it forced because you can't cheat. You do it independently, and you fill out your rankings, and then, no one can influence another person initially until we give you back those scores so that you can see how each candidate ranked. And then we can help you also, if you would like, with interview questions for your first round of interviews and your second round of interviews. We try and tailor those questions to the community, to the board, and to the qualities that you think are most important based on that profile.
And then finalizing the search and beyond. So again, we'll help you with the interviews and final selection. We'll assist the district to reach contractual agreement. We provide a 2-year guarantee on the superintendent search. So if the board isn't happy or the candidate leaves for whatever reason, we'll come back and do the search for free. Provide ongoing yearly assistance at no cost. So we have a board, what is it?
Self-assessment.
Board self-assessment, correct. And we do that every single year that the candidate stays. So 7 years here, 7 times we'll come back and do that every single year at no cost. And we'll help if you need help with building the new leadership team. I will go ahead, and this is exactly what I was talking about with the board self-assessment survey. So these are some things that we can help you on, such as community relations, fiscal responsibility, and setting expectations, et cetera. So with all that being said, and I see our clock here, we made it within the time frame. We really want to help you guys. 43 years of business doing this. We're the oldest and largest national executive search firm that does this across the country. We do large systems, we do small systems, we do charter schools, and we also do university systems as well. So in the back of your packet there, you'll see all the college towns that we have done across the country. I think that's very important for you to know. We also have Missouri and Kansas searches that we've done, as well as districts like you and like your size. But we really want you to know that we have had very, very, I'm sorry.
Expedite timeline.
Oh, yeah. We've had very high success in college towns. And we also know that you wanted an expedited timeline from the one that we actually gave you. And so we have a copy of that we can hand out right now. And with that, we are open to questions.
Great, thank you. So I think you heard me mention we have a list of questions, and each board member is going to ask one of the questions. You may have already covered some of it. We'll kind of work our way through it. So I will start. So you mentioned about your community engagement plan, and this is a multi-part question, kind of give you an idea of what we're looking for. What do you look for to tailor the plan to the unique nature of our community? And how do you ensure a diverse pool of feedback from the community? And how do you use survey data with those focus groups?
So usually 2 of us attend each focus group. One takes notes like a recorder, the other asks the questions. We ask each group the same questions so that you get that opportunity to see how each group has answered the very same question. So that's one way that you can filter for consistency. Then we take that information and we compile it into an Excel spreadsheet based on the qualities and characteristics, the 30 qualities and characteristics of each candidate. So you'll see a spreadsheet that has a column for parents and that's because they self-reported themselves as a parent or a retired teacher or a student or classified staff, administrator, maybe you have an education foundation group you want us to meet with. So we will take all of those results, and it's just a numerical calculation, and then they will be ranked according to what the top characteristics are for all groups. Does that answer that for you?
Yes. I think the one thing maybe to touch back on was the online survey that you do. Is that, I mean, the question we had was, how do you use it to inform the focus group discussions, or is that a separate kind of entry into the spreadsheet, I guess?
So the qualities and characteristics will be included in the spreadsheet.
Okay.
And I will tell you that if you have languages that you would like us to, we have every language you can imagine that we can put a survey online for them to be able to access.
Okay.
So that's very easy for us to do.
And not only that, Ralph speaks fluent Spanish.
So,
Fantastic.
So you touched a little bit on this, but can you give us a little more information on how exactly you'll develop your pool of candidates and the steps that you take to ensure a diverse candidate pool?
I think what we first do is we have one-on-one individual sessions with all of you. And we can get some clues as to who you're seeking in the next superintendent through you all. But we also have to go ahead and find out, from our conversations at the open forums, as well as, the surveys. And we really break it down. This is what we heard. If there's common themes, we'll come back to you and tell you these are common themes. Again, we want to go ahead and recruit people off of those personal conversations and surveys rather than just digging through a pool of resumes and whatnot.
is your question, though, how we recruit those candidates? Is that your question?
I think you were getting to it, so just if you can. keep
Okay,
going.
so once we have that profile, which tells us what you're looking for, then we advertise nationally. We also make sure that all of our associates throughout the United States know this is the position, these are the qualities and characteristics, who have you worked with that might be a quality applicant for this school district? So not only is it on our website, the opening, your website, it's nationally advertised, and we'll work with you on where you would like to see it. We'll recommend where we'd like to see it, but you're the final authority on that. And then we're all very well connected, and so we start making phone calls to people that we think would be a good fit for your district that we know of, an experienced quality superintendent.
As well as go in and recruit at state and national conventions.
If there's time.
Yeah, Illinois will be in there, Texas will be in there in that time frame, so we'll be on-site recruiting at those places, as well as NAPSI and ALIS.
I think you touched upon this too, but you said that the team we would work with would be the three of you. Is that
Plus
right?
Gloria
Gloria
Davis, who's
Davis.
not.
Right, okay.
And she's very, very sad that she could not be here, but she will be an integral part of this team.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you've answered this mostly, so I'll just see if you have anything you want to add to it. But describe your marketing strategy for our search. Where will you post the position? How do you leverage social media to attract candidates to Lawrence?
And we use social media quite a bit, but we will work with you. We'll give you a list of all the places that we can advertise and see whether or not that would meet your expectations. We'll give you recommendations for that. We do social media, certainly Facebook, Twitter, websites, print publications if you feel that's important to you. Not everybody uses those any longer because most people just go out and look on a website when they're looking for a position.
And one of the things that we do as a firm, a lot of firms will go ahead and tell you where to spend your money. What we'll do is during the first meeting with you all, we'll sit down and say, here are your options. This is, in our experience, this is your best bang for your buck. So we're not just going to spend your money for you.
And
That's
of
your
course,
job.
if we're working in the state of Kansas, which, we'll go to all the Kansas associations to make sure that it's published there as well as surrounding states. It's pretty national. We're a national search firm, so we've got lots of national organizations that we work with.
So you've definitely touched on this, although there's one aspect that you haven't. So how do you vet candidates? How frequently do you conduct background checks? And what do you check? Do you have updated background checks during or search for candidates with whom you've previously worked? Do you verify the candidate has or can obtain a Kansas license if they're from another state? And I think the last part is...
Yes. So I personally, when I'm working on a search, I personally do the background checks with my partners. We try and divide it up, but we vet people pretty thoroughly. We check all the social media, if anybody's got a Twitter account, a Facebook account, Google, Bing. Then we go to local newspapers. I see you've got the Lawrence Journal-World over here. We go to the community where they are currently a superintendent, because I imagine most of the folks who will be that you're interested in will be sitting superintendents. And we want to see what kind of print media is out there. We'll look at television stations if they're in a community that has that option for them. And then we'll certainly, we'll of course call their references, but we'll also call people that we know that live and work in the community or might have worked with them in another position, and what do they know about them? Because you don't always just check the people that you listed. So
And then
pretty
again, at
thorough.
the end, when you're top 2 or 3, your criminal, your bankruptcy, we'll find out all about that kind of stuff.
Honest to
too.
goodness, I like to talk to the clerical staff. They know everything.
You're right.
Everything.
Thanks, Ruth.
Again, you touched on this, but I was wondering if you can tell us more about it. How do you vet the candidate's digital presence?
Yeah. So again, we'll go through any Twitter account that we can find on them, Facebook, anything, any blogs that are out there, even though, sometimes blogs are not necessarily legitimate, but we still read them, and we'll let the board know if we've read anything that we think is concerning. Certainly, we'll do the criminal background check when we get closer to the end here with the final candidates.
So I'm sorry, all the candidates, you check their digital presence?
Anybody that we're going to bring forward to you, like, let's say there's 12 candidates, we want you to take a look at their application and their
interview.
video. We will have thoroughly vetted them, except for the criminal background check, unless something popped up in the media, then we won't bring that person to you.
Thank you.
Will the board be able to look at all of the applications submitted and then who actually gets all of those materials at the end of the search?
The answer is yes. I mean, you'll get a list of names of all the people that applied and whatnot, and where they were from, and we can bring that to you at the meeting when we present you like our top 8 to 12 candidates.
You'll have all of the information that we've compiled, their application, background information that we've found, and you'll have their video interview as well. So we'll give you a list, though, of all of the folks that have applied. Some we may feel are not appropriate for this district, and we will tell you why we feel that.
And then is there an additional cost for printed materials?
There is. If you look in your proposal, I believe it's on.
I think there's a small charge for copying and mailing, right?
Cost savings plans, consultants. It's actually something that we had talked about earlier this summer at our summer meeting. And one of the things that we were actually going to make sure that we cut out was that paper expense. And now looking at it.
You don't see it in there, do you?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be in there. So that's a great thing for you.
Cool, thanks.
We try and give you as many things electronically as we can, but
Sure.
you're not probably going to get the applications electronically because you're going to want to read them, write on them, highlight them, mark them up.
Okay. With the changes in the election cycle in Kansas this year, our board will have at least 2 new board members joining us at the beginning of January. So given that information, what timeline do you recommend for conducting our search? Is it the timeline that was in the initial proposal? We asked for the compressed timeline, thinking, do we go shorter because to conclude the search before the board turns over? Do we extend it out further after January? How are you approaching that with districts?
So I can tell you what Shawnee Mission is doing because they have a similar situation. They have, I think, the potential for 3 new board members. So we've started the process, much like we're doing here tonight. We've been awarded that contract. I have a first meeting with them on September 6th. And their belief is that it would be good to do your stakeholder meetings and the survey and collect all of that, collect the applications, do the advertising, collect all that information during the first semester of school. And then when the new board members come on board, then you will interview and offer a contract. So they've got the opportunity to be a part of that. So that's what Shawnee Mission is doing. I've done it very quickly with Olathe, where they did all of their applications, meetings, interviews prior to winter break, and they awarded that contract to their new superintendent in December. But they didn't have an election coming up the next month, so.
Yes, I just have a quick follow-up to that because, would that be then a modification of the initial timeline that was in the packet you gave us initially? Because as it stands, it would have basically the board finalizing interview questions and selecting top candidates, or at least seeing all those finalists their first day, kind of on the job, which might seem like a hard first day.
That's just a draft.
Okay.
That's just, yeah,
Never mind.
yeah.
Okay,
It's
so
just-
would you then suggest
Absolutely.
delaying, or do you have advice about what you think would be best practice?
For me, I'm going to say that it's your choice as a community, what makes sense to you and what your community will accept. Do they want an expedited calendar and search or not? And so you know your community better than we do.
How does it affect the pool if we delay it?
You're only delaying like 2 months, and it's not really a delay. I'm thinking a February maybe decision. Is that what makes more sense to you?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's 2 seasons when superintendents are looking, before the holidays and after the holidays. And so actually, some of the biggest national conventions, if you waited a little bit, you would be hitting those, where you wouldn't if you did it earlier.
Okay. Okay.
Do you think good pools, no matter whether we
I
do it
think
early or late?
You're going to be fine.
Okay.
You guys
This
are
is a
sitting
quality
pretty.
school district. People, I mean, you're well-known.
You're
People,
going to have people from all over the country.
oh, yeah, absolutely.
Clear.
So you mentioned there's a 2-year guarantee on the search.
Right.
So that was the other question. So I want to follow up to the license question about the Kansas license. I don't think we really heard that answer. So do you ensure that the candidates
Yes.
are all licensed in the state or can be by the time? we
Yes,
want them in?
absolutely. Yeah, fully licensed or eligible to be licensed.
And I think the other, just to, have you ever had to honor a guarantee for a district?
Yes. We've had to honor in situations such as Governor Huckabee came and handpicked somebody for his cabinet. We didn't have to go back necessarily and do that search. There was an untimely death at one point, and there was a divorce gone bad. And so those are 3 that I know about. And I think that there's one other that we had to honor. That was before my time. And we've been in business for 43 years, doing 50 searches a year. We've done state superintendent for Ohio, Florida, Michigan, Wyoming, Hawaii. And so we think we have a very good track record. We obviously wouldn't be getting those jobs if we didn't.
Okay.
Thank you for the question.
Okay. I think we're right at the 30-minute mark, unless there's any additional questions from the board at this point. Oh, okay. Thank you very much for your time this
Very
evening.
much.
Appreciate
And
it.
Gloria will be here if we're chosen, so.
Great.
thank you very
Okay.
much.
That sounds great.
We understand about that timing. We own the decision to choose the meeting dates.
Well, she's really excited, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let me put their information in the folder.
Okay. Select connect. We have that stapled sheet that Dave put together, because I think that already answers the question about, is there a cost for printed materials, doesn't it?
You just ask it anyway.
Okay.
And the reason being is that
Just
they included it in their proposal, but nobody else mentioned it. So wanting to find out if it's comparable.
I see.
If they do it and they just don't.
Talk about it.
I thought that's what I remember. Do you want to take a look at it?
Oh, yeah, cool.
Station.
I meant to get rid of
Oh, sorry, it's what I noticed. I had to document it.
And that has not binder.
Right. I know that person. You know, congratulations
Thank
on
you.
the career and everything going well.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Well, when we hired you in Blue Valley as a middle school assistant, we said, that lady's going someplace. So I'm glad to see you.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. How you doing?
Nice to meet you.
Hi. Hi.
Kimball, how are you doing?
Nice to meet you.
Thanks.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Shannon Kimball, how are you doing?
Marcelina.
I know.
Work over here, I'm Dave Benson.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hello.
Okay.
Ready? We're ready.
Okay, School Exec Connect, this is Dr. David Benson, and he's going to introduce his team.
Well, good evening. We're pleased to be here this evening, and I am joined tonight by a partner in our firm, Dr. Craig Larson, and two other associates, Dr. Dennis Fisher and Dr. Don Sinti. Dr. Sinti is a very experienced Missouri educator from St. Louis. Dr. Fisher is an experienced Missouri educator from the Kansas City area. And I bounced around so much, I'm not sure where I'm from, but my longest tenure was 11-year superintendency in Blue Valley here in Johnson County. And Dr. Larson is from the St. Louis area, but I think Dr. Sinti and Dr. Larson both have KU backgrounds, so they're certainly well aware. I think they got here and they got a little pumped up, just the waft of the air from You have some material that we've passed out, and you may notice we're not going to use a overhead. Our standard overhead is the first item in your packet. What I'm going to do tonight, very quickly, is what I tell myself and my subordinate administrators when I was working, said, try to figure out what a board wants to hear. Tell them that. Let them drive the issue through their questions, because this is really a board process, and I want you to feel like you had opportunity to get all of your questions addressed. So I'm going to start out and just postulate some board questions, and we'll just take a few minutes. If I were a board member, what would I want to know about your firm? Our firm's been in existence for 13 years. We have 60 associates across the Midwest. We're joined by one of our partners tonight. School Exec Connect is an exclusive school district client organization. We do searches for superintendents, other district office administrators, and principals. You would work with the lead associate through the process, but we will have a diverse group of individuals working on this project, and our commitment to you is to bring forth a diverse candidate pool that matches the superintendent profile that is created through the process, and you can see more about that in the material. We are a learning organization ourselves. We use quality tools. We're associated, several of us, with the Baldrige standards, and we have an annual conference in which we seek to get better at what we do. We are primarily retired Midwest superintendents, and I want to emphasize we have a deep, deep concern about our profession and our responsibility to our students. We know you're the client as the Board of Education, but we take a very deep responsibility to understand that the students are clients, the faculty and staff of the district, and indeed the community of the school, the community of Lawrence. If I were a board member, I might want to know, how does School Exec Connect measure success? We measure success by the placement of candidates, which means success for us is the completion of the first contract and an offer of the second contract. And we have a 96% success rate in placing candidates in districts that are offered second contracts. What are the costs? What are the guarantees? Well, our cost, as stipulated in our contract proposal, is $18,500 for consulting fees and $2,650 for expenses. And our guarantee is really simple. If you separate the superintendent in the first year, or if the superintendent separates themselves, whomever that might be, we'll come back and do a free search for you. There'll be no expense. Now, obviously, superintendent is deceased, that kind of is a different issue. But if you separate them, or they separate themselves, we'll come back. How does School Exec Connect do its work? We have a standard outline process in the PowerPoint. However, no two searches are the same. We customize the process to meet the needs of the board. This customization occurs in a meeting with the board early on in the process and is designed to meet the needs of the board as you seek to represent your community. Diversity is an important consideration, and the community input process provides a level of ownership with key stakeholder groups in the final outcome. I want to emphasize that point. This is your process. We are your facilitators. We are here to help you through this process, and we will design based upon your input. Is the search confidential? Always a question board members might want to know. School Exec Connect has conducted confidential and open searches. We can do both. We believe that a confidential search will bring forth the best candidates, but a combination search is also possible. And personally, I've been involved in those where the initial group of candidates is confidential, and then when there's the finalist, that becomes a public issue, and those candidates are known. So that's a combination process. But we can do what the board wants to do. We have the necessary resources to complete this project at any time frame the board would like to utilize, utilizing our diverse group of associates. We have 3 here tonight, and we have many more that live in reasonable proximity, and we can bring in resources as needed. So it's entirely up to you in terms of the calendar for what the search looks like. If I were a board member, I would want to know, how am I going to be involved? Am I individually going to be interviewed in the process to create a superintendent profile, which then we go out and search for? And the answer is yes. Board members will be interviewed as well as any other stakeholder groups that you identify. Another question I think board members would want to know I'm concerned that any candidate we interview are vetted and truly interested in the Lawrence superintendent position. In other words, don't waste my time bringing me in some ringer. One of our primary responsibilities is to vet candidates to fit the superintendent profile that will be developed at your direction. But more than that, for us to establish a personal relationship with those candidates so that we know them. We know them well, deeply, and if they were presented to your community, we are telling you that there's nothing in their background that would be an embarrassment if you ultimately want to select that person. We're going to know these individuals. If I'm a board member, I want to know, how am I going to be kept up to date and informed of the process of the search? The lead consultant will work with the board president and or the select board members that you might select to provide information and timely progress reports, whether those be written or presentations to the board in an open meeting. I'm here. I retired where my children both live, over in Overland Park, and it's easy for me to come to Lawrence and be readily available. Dr. Fisher is just in the Northlands and is easily available also. The last question I'll specifically answer for you. Will School Exec Connect help in contract and salary matters to complete the process? Well, yes. We'll provide any material and salary comparisons, informations at the discretion of the board. We understand Lawrence is a sophisticated district and probably has a board attorney that would be involved in contract matters and processes. But we want you to know that we are committed to the success of the contract negotiations and the placement. Those are the things that I wanted to lead with. Our associates and partner are here, and we would be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much. So we do have a set of prepared questions that we're asking each firm. So I will start, and we'll just go down the line, and then we'll come back, and the two of us will have a second question for you. So you touched a little bit on your community engagement plan. What do you look for to tailor the plan to the unique nature of our community? How do you ensure that there's a diverse pool of feedback from the community? And do you use survey data in that process?
We have a survey. It's in the packet of material that you have. We would customize it as necessary. Let's just take Lawrence, for example. You have a large university community here that is influential in what's going on. We would want to talk to the board in designing that process around what stakeholder groups that you wanted. Another community might not have a university. When we did the Park Hill position, that was not a particular consideration. And Dr. Larson and Dennis Fisher and I did that search for that district. But it's customizable. We can do whatever groups that you want. And that is part of the design work that we would do with you.
I would imagine that a part of that question is trying to find the constituents that you'd love to know their voice, but sometimes are harder to get a hold of. So that's a discussion we have, to identify those groups, and then, do we go out to meetings that may draw them, visit churches, or, whatever makes sense to try to get a hold of the voices that wouldn't naturally fill out a survey for you. I mean, we find that the survey gets pretty good response, but you don't know, it's not a scientific survey, so you don't really know, did that represent the whole community? So that's an important part of the discussion.
And we do part of the survey is we would post the survey on your website and ask for general community input. And we would encourage the board to also post the timeline and process key points that we agree upon if we're engaged.
Can you talk a little bit about how you'll develop your pool of candidates for the search? What steps are you going to take to ensure that we have a diverse candidate pool? Yeah, and I guess I'm curious specifically about what you're going to do to create a diverse set of candidates.
We have contacts and associates throughout the Midwest, and one of our commitments to you is that we will bring you a diverse pool in gender, race, and ethnicity, and we have the contacts to be able to do that. I would just add one thing. We don't have a standard pool of people that we recycle from one job to the next. That's not how we do business. Our superintendent profile, we go out and recruit through personal contacts, and I call a personal friend of mine who's in the business and ask for a recommendation. That gives me a pretty good heads up that that's somebody we want to follow up with.
You might look at us in the districts we've been under about how much we to us. Most of you probably know that we've had a voluntary interdistrict transfer program. There are, okay, and have been up to 17% of the student population in St. Louis County districts, other than the North County, which is above that. When I was superintendent of Parkway, we had 3,500 students from the city. At the peak, there were 13,000 kids coming to St. Louis County. There's still 5,000. So the employees and the administrators were very well networked in that community. For example, I'm good friends with Kelvin Adams, who's a superintendent in St. Louis, and he's networked nationally. So.
Is there a team that we would be working with? And if so, who would it be the four of you? And who would be the point person that we would work with?
I would be the lead, and this is the team, unless we bring additional personnel power in.
We do have other people that would probably be helping with the communication.
Can you describe your marketing strategy for a search? Where will you post the position? How do you leverage social media to attract candidates to Lawrence?
So that's literally part of that open discussion. But, you know, what has shifted in the last 5 to 7 years is how important it is to do print ads. So we sit down and talk to you about whether or not you want to use a print ad in Education Week, which is the typical place to put that. So that's the single most expensive thing to do. Almost everything else is fairly affordable. So then it's a matter of finding how many different websites can you get on, where do you get that diverse pool of candidates. We typically use Top Jobs, which is a website that allows you to advertise, gets a lot of attention from school administrators throughout the United States. We use our own website, we use your website, and probably some of the administrator websites in Kansas, Missouri, maybe neighboring states, to post the job, post the description of the job, what are you looking for in terms of the kinds of leadership skills and background that the district needs at this point in time. So you want the word out, you also want people to know, why would this job be interesting to me? Having said that, all that marketing helps get the word out, but what David said is probably the reality is the candidate that you want may not know they're even looking for a job right now. So after we find out what are you looking for, then we begin to talk to other people we know who make recommendations, or we follow up on a thought that we had about an individual that we'd heard about or that we worked with at another point in time. Is this the right next step in their career? So that is one of the most important ways to find really valuable candidates.
I'd just like to emphasize what Craig said. You're the best candidate, maybe if it isn't even looking at the websites. They're not looking for a job. The superintendent of Parkway had, currently, we tapped him on the shoulder. So that's important.
So how do you vet candidates? How frequently do you conduct background checks? And what do you check? Do you update, this is a multi-part question. Do you update background checks during our search for candidates with whom you've previously worked? Do you verify that the candidate has or can obtain a Kansas license if they're from another state?
Go ahead. You have the most experience with it.
Yeah, so the answer to that is essentially yes, kind of going across there. And those are all very important parts. So certainly do a web search, talk to the candidate, anything in your background that, you feel that we should know that would somehow be an issue, that's critical. If they don't reveal that, obviously they're kind of eliminated immediately as you in our internet world, it's amazing how much you can find out about people. The best background, and the kind of the reason our particular firm has been so successful, is that the candidates we bring forward, we know someone, if we don't know that candidate already, we know someone who's worked with that candidate, knows them, and we keep working until we find that out. And give you a little bit of an extended example. So a very interesting candidate from California applies and looks good on paper. Well, we would want to talk to a California superintendent that one or more of us knows that individual, knows what their work ethic is, knows that they haven't ever been in trouble in their professional life, or there's no scandal associated with them. And unfortunately, the truth is, you do find candidates that seem qualified in sort of the first blush, or maybe even beyond that, but then you find out that there's something about their background or their performance, the way they actually do their work, that isn't what you would want, and maybe the reason they're leaving. So it's really important to do that kind of work. Clearly, one of your questions was they have to be certified in Kansas, so you check all that out before you go, any distance with the candidate.
The only thing I'd add to that is we spend a lot of time going on off-the-paper reference checks. What I mean by that is, obviously, we're going to check the references that the candidate puts on their application, but we're going to search through our network of contacts for people who aren't on that recommendation list and try to connect the dots back about the background of that individual if we don't know them personally. Even if we do know them personally, to make sure that those credentials are appropriate, the experiences are appropriate, and the match to Lawrence Public Schools is appropriate.
I would add, just a plug to the local papers, getting on and doing a search of the Journal World over the last 6 months, you can find out a lot about somebody. So those are all things that we would do. And you might be thinking in your mind, how do these guys know people in California to call? I mean, these are all Midwest people. I'm past president of Suburban School Superintendents, which is a group of 100 high-performing school districts all across the country. And all three of these individuals are members of that group at one time, and their associates. I worked with other national groups, so we're well connected.
I had a follow-up question from Jessica, but my question was, how do you vet the candidate's digital presence? And then, I apologize, forget your name. When you, the gentleman, yes,
Dr. Larson?
from St. Louis, when you were referring to the 13,005 and the 5,000, I wasn't sure what
Well, there was
numbers were referencing.
I think some people
think of St. Louis County as pretty much a Caucasian school districts, right? But 13 or 16 districts have been involved in a transfer program that receives transfers from the city of St. Louis. That started in 1980, so it's gone on for a long time. At its peak, there were 13,000 kids a day transferring to St. Louis County District from the city. And as I said, when I was at Parkway, which is a large district, we had 3,500 kids just coming to Parkway. That would have been the 10th largest school district in the state at that time. So what I'm saying is we have experience, even though we're from St. Louis County and other suburban districts that you might consider not to understand diversity or have contacts in that world, we do.
Just an anecdote on that. Dr. Tiffany Anderson worked with me in Rockwood for several years before she went on to Jennings and is now in Topeka. So what's happened over these last 30 years in St. Louis County is a very diverse pool of administrators and teachers to reflect the student body.
I think the question on vetting for the electronic vetting is we get on and look. I mean, we are all going to vet those individuals, and nobody would be presented to you that is not thoroughly vetted in every way we can think of.
Okay, my question is, will the board be able to look at all of the applications that are submitted? And who gets all of the application materials at the conclusion of the search?
Yes, and you. People are applying through our websites and our systems, but those are your materials. You would have them at the end of the process. And whether or not you look at all of the candidates or whether or not you tell us to bring us X number of candidates, that's a decision that you would direct us on. Bringing all of the paperwork in is possible. That's not a problem.
And is there an additional cost for printed materials with your firm? No, okay, thank you.
No, and we have capability to handle that. I would say what I think is an important point, when we talked earlier about a confidential search or the blended search, which Dave described, I thought, rather well. What that means is, in the initial round, as we're talking to people, we can do that confidentially and say, if you end up being interested, the board is willing to interview a first round of candidates without disclosing who they are. So that means that stays confidential. And that's your decision, and we act on that, and we guarantee that, obviously. If you choose not to do that, you're going to announce all the candidates, then that changes sort of what we say to candidates when we're recruiting them. But I also like the idea of, at the end of the process, you choose 3 that's our normal number, it could be 4 obviously, but you choose around 3 that you're really invested in, then we think it's helpful for the community to know who they are.
Talk about the video.
Yeah, one of the features that's mentioned in there is that when we bring a set of candidates who we would suggest you interview in a first round, 5 to 7, we ask them to do a video introduction of themselves. And we found that gives the board not only the paperwork around the candidate, but you can kind of see them and see how they communicate. That's a good first blush.
Okay. We've had changes in our election cycle in Kansas. We used to have board elections in April. Now they take place in November, and our new members will take office in January. We will have at least 2 new board members beginning with our board in January. So given that information, does that change the timeline that you would recommend for how we conduct our search?
Well, our original recommendation timeline was to do that search after those and complete it after the seating of the new board.
Okay.
We wanted you to know that we can do an expedited search if that's the election of the board.
Okay, thank you.
I think you mentioned that your guarantee on the search is a year. Can you tell me how many times your firm's had to honor a guarantee? And you specifically said you don't guarantee if somebody passes away. Is that right?
He made that as a side comment. We've obviously never had that happen either, but we did have a candidate some years ago who didn't work out, and we did offer to the board to do the search again. So we've had one out of several hundred, 400 and some. So if it happens, then we're going to honor that guarantee and work with you, because our goal is, I think a piece of the guarantee that's sort of not so much that is that we're going to work with you throughout this. And let's just say, you say, why don't you do that confidential search and then bring us 7 people. So we bring you those 7 people, show you the videos, and you aren't enthralled with several of them or whatever, and you want more candidate, we're going to keep going. Our commitment to you is to make sure you're comfortable with the candidate pool you're looking at every step along the way.
Great. Well, that is the conclusion of our written questions. Do you have a follow-up you want
I
to
do
ask?
actually. So a follow-up, I'm actually one of the outgoing board members, and so I may or may not be here for the whole process. And just looking at your proposed timeline, I'm trying to wrap my mind around this idea of in October or through December, that's when the pool would be selected to those top 5 to 7 that we would interview. Would you recommend that, because obviously we can't have the newly elected board members as part of that process because they won't be sworn in as members, they won't have the legal rights to having those executive session types of discussions. So would you recommend delaying that process until they're seated and then delay, you know what I mean? It just seems weird, I guess, to be part of a process to narrow and then not be part of the process to interview and hire. And so it may make sense to alter that schedule a bit. And so have you had any experience with altering schedules based on those needs?
Yeah, based on your situation, I actually talked to the company president, vice president, and we've had a number of scenarios like you just described.
Okay.
So it's a discussion with you all, because the whole board has to decide, right? But the piece that is important is that you don't want to end up hiring a superintendent who feels like some members of the board were not comfortable with their being selected. So some process of communication and interviewing, gathering information from the not yet but to be seated board members is pretty important. It's almost an ethical issue if you think about it. You don't want a board to select somebody and then they show up and a different board says, well, that's probably not where I wanted to go. You don't, that's not a good way to get things started.
Any other follow-up? Okay, thank you very much for your time this evening. We appreciate it.
Thank you. We appreciate the
Thank you.
opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Hi.
Hello.
Oh.
Been warmed up for us now.
We are ready. We are ready.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hey, Shannon Kimball. Nice to meet you.
Melissa?
Yeah.
John Purdue.
Marcel Harmon.
Nice to meet you. John Purdue.
Jessica Beeson?
Jessica, nice to meet you.
Shannon Kimball, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Really, congratulations to you, huh?
Hi there.
John Purdue.
Dawn Downing.
John, nice to meet you, and nice to meet you.
Okay. Ted and John are from Hazard Young and Tia and Associates. Tried to put the end too soon, so I don't know who's going to take the lead, but
Go ahead and start. First of all, thank you for inviting us. Over here. Gotcha.
You're on TV.
All right.
That way everybody can see and hear you both.
Oh, much better.
Don will have a timer for you here in a minute.
Okay.
Just help us keep track of our time this evening.
How much time do we have?
20 minutes.
20 minutes.
And then we'll we have a set of questions
Okay.
that we're going to ask.
We'll try to move through this in less than 20 minutes, give you ample time for your questions that way.
Thank you.
So, first of all, I'm Ted Blazing with Hazard Young and Atia, and
John Purdue with Hazard Young and Atia.
you have our pedigrees in here in terms of our backgrounds. We're not going to dwell upon that. And in the materials we handed out to you on the right-hand side, I believe each of you have seen the proposal that was sent. So we're not going to go through that. You've had it and have had a chance to review it, we assume. On the left-hand side, the first document is a PowerPoint. So I have the PowerPoint clicker here in my hand. As we move through these, we'll just flip the pages today and move through them rather than doing this. Let me just say a little bit about ourselves here. Sure. John and I have worked on, most recently on a search in Des Moines, Iowa, for the Heartland Area Education Agency in Iowa. They have intermediate districts that are quite large, quite powerful. So it was the largest and certainly the most influential AEA in Iowa. I've been doing searches with HYA for a number of years. I've led over 30 searches now. So been around the search business for a while and look forward to perhaps working right here in Lawrence with you. John?
Thank you for your service, first of all. Always appreciate the role of a board member and the service that you do. I've worked with many great boards, and I like to say I work with boards rather than for boards because it has to be a collaborative relationship. So thank you for what you do. As you can see, my resume, I have some 45 years of experience. I've done a number of different roles, all of which I think are highly important. The decision you're making here is the most important one you'll make, as you well know. And so our job here is to try to provide the very best service we can for you and the highest caliber candidate for you.
Let me take you to page 2 at the top. We have 4 guarantees that we lay out for you. Some of these are pretty evident right from the beginning. Number 1, we're going to stick with you all the way through this process, regardless of the twists and turns it might take. It's your search. We're here to assist you. And we're going to customize this to make it your search. So that's guarantee number 1. Number 2, if the superintendent should leave for whatever reason during that first year, regardless of the reason, we're back here to assist you with the search at no charge. And then the second thing is, once this new superintendent is appointed, they're going to come here and fall in love with this place, and you're going to fall in love with this person, and they're going to stay here a long time. We're going to call them. We're going to check in with them. How are things going? Tell us about life in Lawrence. What's the issues? We're not going to try to recruit them for 5 years. Hands off us for 5 years. And then there's a price match. So if there's a comparable search that is comparable to what we're proposing here, their number is a little less than ours, call us. We work with our large corporate structure and figure out a way to do a price match for that. So those are the 4 guarantees that we have.
At the bottom of the page, we talk about what school leaders focus on, and let me now send you to the second document on the right-hand side. It's a white paper on effective superintendents. One piece of advice for you. Regardless of who you wind up selecting to assist you with your search, take a little time to read through this.
It's an excellent document. It's well worth your read.
It really grounds and bodes well on what makes for an effective superintendent. And by the way, later on, we talk about a very robust survey instrument that can be made available to the entire community. And many of the qualities that we ask survey participants to identify are drawn from what makes for an effective superintendent. So it all knits together quite nicely. Okay, let's go to page 4. We talk about the HYA difference. You're looking at 2 members of over 100 associates. It's the nation's largest and one of the oldest superintendent search firms. I happen to have known all 3 of the men who founded the firm many, many years ago. The signature search process is found in a booklet. John's on the right-hand side, correct?
Yes.
Looks like so. This lays out the different steps within the search process, a typical search process. And again, it's your search. We can modify this. We can change it, customize it to fit your needs and your nuances here in Lawrence. So on that 3rd page, page number 3 of this document, you see a diagram that has, in essence, 2 columns. The left-hand column, as divided by the hashed line there, are the board responsibilities. The right-hand column are our responsibilities. And then you see the rows going across. Those indicate the 4 phases of a typical search process. So for example, the engagement phase, first thing we would do, we'd have a planning meeting with you, and we would lay out in detail each step of the search process and dates. So if your life is organized around magnets on the refrigerator, we recommend bring in the refrigerator because we're going to put some dates on that refrigerator during the search process that we need to hold sacrosanct to keep things moving along. You would identify who you want us to visit with when we come. The 2 of us would come and spend 2 full days in the community meeting with either one-on-one focus groups, large community forums, in a leadership profile. At the same time, we're going to have the survey instrument up with a link via your website. Folks can take that survey in 2 different languages, and that's another way to collect input from the community. Community engagement is very important in this process. We spend a lot of time on it up front and early on. Once we've done that, we'll come back to you with a leadership profile report. Here's what we heard, here's what we learned, here's what the survey participants said. And by the way, on the left-hand side again of the folder, you see a sample of the profile survey. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through that. But it's a little different than when we meet with you, for example, doing profile interviews that are very much open. This has some forced decision-making within it. And then there's a sample survey report. So we crunch a lot of numbers, give it to you, looking many different ways. You can contrast yourself to other similar school districts on what folks have found to be important to see if things bubble up that are different. You can contrast teachers versus administrators versus parents versus students versus board members, if you so choose, to see where your different values might align and where they stand apart from one another.
It's important to note that I think this whole engaged phase really is a great community outreach on your behalf as a Board of Education, as well as informing you about goals in the district and the incoming superintendent.
We're going to come back to you and present that profile report along with desired attributes, desired characteristics, albeit personal or professional, that the community and others who have participated in providing input have told us they would like to see in that next superintendent of schools. You then decide these are appropriate because you have unique positions as school board members that may differ from community members, from parents, teachers, et cetera. So you would sign off on that. Now, let me just jump ahead. You have what turns out to be not so unique, maybe unique in Kansas, situation where some board members are not going to be here perhaps after the first year, and new board members might be here after the first year. In the schedule we've laid out for you, it still wraps up in February. The part that new board members would not have a chance to do is to sign off on the desired characteristics. They would have a chance for input. If you chose to do so, we could sit down with them one-on-one for their input in putting together the profile report. They could certainly listen in to all of our presentations.
Attending focus groups,
Right, so.
community meetings.
But then, the interview of candidates, the review of candidate information online via the portal for you to review, could be done by the new board members. And the interviews then beginning, obviously, I think we said in early February, with a wrap-up of around mid-February.
Find our projected timeline on the left side. It's a single sheet of paper,
Very last document.
all of which is adjustable
Yep.
based upon your needs and what you see, but we thought we'd give you a place to start.
Now, if you wanted to really step on the gas and finish this by December 31, it could be done. It could be done. There's a couple options here to think about. Okay. That's a little bit about the engagement phase. The recruitment phase, we're going to post a position in, the traditional places, Ed Week, Top Job, state associations. Let me tell you something that's a bit unique about HYA. On our website, we post every superintendent position out there. So if the Nevada School Board Association is running a search for somebody, they post it on our website. If Gary Ray has positions out there, we'll post his on our website. If whoever has jobs out there. So what happens is, it's kind of one-stop shopping for potential superintendents and superintendents that are looking for positions. They go to our website. Obviously, ours get top billing, but then they can see all the other positions in the country that are out there on one website.
If you're looking at the ECRA website, it's under leadership, and you'll see it on the right-hand side. You'll just fill in the page as you wait for it to populate.
You can also look at it by geographic region of the country, which many superintendents are only interested in living within a certain geographic area, perhaps from their home, whatever it might be.
So from a recruitment phase, this is really advantageous to the prospective superintendent to look at that website and see what's available across the country.
Over 100 associates. Not a week goes by, we don't have conversations with somebody out there looking for a candidate. We just shared a story on the way out about a fellow who's recruiting the state of Texas pretty heavy right now. He's looking for candidates, and we told him good luck. A lot going on there, and that's a tough recruit right now. During the selection phase, it's up to you on how many candidates you want to interview. We normally recommend 5. Sometimes it works out 6, sometimes maybe 7, sometimes 4. Depends upon where that natural break is. We will set up for you a board portal. On that portal will be not a paper blizzard, but every document that is generated for you by us or that you provide to us. So you have it all right in one place. And you can access it while sitting here at this table.
Leadership profile report will be there, the focus group meeting notes will be there, ultimately applications will be there.
If you
What
choose,
you want to see.
yeah, if you choose to look at applicants, you can choose to do that. Recently, I worked with the school board. They wanted to look at all applicants. That's not a problem. We put them on the board portal. But they didn't want to wade through everybody, so we put them into different files. So like, here's an A file. These folks are well qualified, nice background of experiences, line up with what you're looking for. Preparation appear to be quite solid. B, maybe they're missing one or two things here. And then C might be all others. Sometimes we refer to as wannabe. They want to be the superintendent at Lawrence campus.
Someday.
They're not quite ready, not quite ready. So it's your call on that, how many you want to see in which way. Selection
Certainly
phase.
when we get to the finals, when you have maybe 5 people you want to interview, you obviously would have their entire credential package.
Absolutely. But you can access that off the website. You can see everything they've submitted, all their letters of application, their transcripts from schools that they've attended, all those kinds of things. We'll meet with you. We'll facilitate your discussions. We'll facilitate the process to narrow the number of candidates. We'll work with you in setting up a schedule to bring them back in for a second time, usually much longer. It's your call whom all you want to have them meet with when they are here. And eventually,
We conduct an interview workshop with you.
develop questions. We'll ask, things to listen for in response to the questions. Eventually, we'll meet with you on the day that hopefully we'll send white smoke up the chimney and select the next leader for the Lawrence schools. That's a little bit on the selection phase. Transition, there's a menu of services that you can access through HYA for transition services. But something we've started doing is a joint meeting, board, new superintendent. Sometimes we do this electronically before they've shown up, just to make certain everybody is listening and seeing and hearing the same things that bubbled up during the search process to help with that transition, to get them off to a good running start when they show up here on July 1. So, cost structure I'm not going to talk about. Darn it, I missed the 15 minutes that I promised them. We'll pause there and love to entertain your questions.
Okay, so we do have a set of questions that we're asking all the firms this evening. You may have touched on some of the information already, so bear with us. First question, about your community engagement plan. What do you look for to tailor the plan to the unique nature of our community? And how will you ensure a diverse pool of feedback from the community? And how do you end up using that survey data? Is it to create the characteristics, or do you use that when you meet with focus groups?
Okay. Normally, the survey is open when we're meeting with focus groups, and there's good reason for that. We don't want to influence what focus groups might be thinking. We want them to tell us what they're thinking. We don't know if it's fact or fiction, but we do know this. It's what people believe, and it's what they're thinking, and you need to honor that. So not only is it helpful, very helpful to us, informing what are we looking for in this next superintendent, what's the best match for Lawrence. It's very helpful to you to see, is that aligning with what I'm hearing, what I'm thinking, what I'm believing? It's very helpful to the new superintendent. Again, we tell them, we don't know if this is fact or fiction. You can determine that once you've begun there, but it's what people believe. You need to be aware of this. You need to honor it coming into position. John?
We will work with your staff, your communications director, whom we met coming in, all of your media outlets that you have to try to advertise and solicit people to come to these meetings. The same things you would use. We would certainly work with you to secure the best possible turnouts we possibly can. The survey would be completed first. And from that survey, if you look at the survey report here in the back couple pages, you will see a sample of how this filters out into what some of the common responses people are saying, which then begins to inform, well, how would we plan the community forums or the focus group meetings? We would probe around these issues with some select questions. So when asking about a plan, Shannon, that's exactly what we would do. And use this to inform how we would approach those community forums. And then we would summarize those along with this survey and eventually then develop a leadership profile report. Here's what we heard.
The wisdom of the crowd. The wisdom of the crowd.
So how do you develop your pool of candidates for the search? And what steps do you take to ensure that it is a diverse?
Well, we've invited them here this evening. We're waiting, no, I'm kidding. You know, my experience has been that the next superintendent of schools for the Lawrence Public Schools is probably sitting at her or at his desk tomorrow, not thinking about being a candidate in Lawrence. So certainly the marketing that we talked about earlier is a piece, but picking up the phone, calling folks, saying, I think you need to look at this opportunity, and here's the reason why. That really is an advantage with HYA, given our reach. I can also tell you that the conversations tend to unfold quite similarly. Most folks will say, tell me a little bit about the school district. That speech is your 2-minute elevator speech that you all give to folks when they say, what's happening? And then always their second question is, tell me a little bit about the board. So they want to know more than, well, it's 7 very nice people. They want to know person by person a little bit about you and your background and why.
And how the board works together. Do you work together? Is it a collaborative culture? Who's coming and who's going?
But that's, you know, a little bit, I don't know, Jessica, if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, I wanted you to specifically talk to how do you ensure a diverse pool of candidates?
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. But before we would begin to do that, we want to know what we're looking for. And a lot of boards will say, well, aren't the desired attributes and characteristics pretty much the same? Au contraire. No, they are not. They vary widely from school district to school district. So then it's finding candidates that have those attributes and trying to pique their interest.
Will we work with the same consultants throughout the entire search process and post-hire follow-up? And if so, who would be the primary point of contact with the board?
You're looking at them.
You're looking at them.
So you are our team?
We're it.
Okay.
We're it. And so,
Yes, yes, and yes.
on that, you have, I think, our business cards.
They're inside the covers there, our contact information. We're available by phone, email.
My cell phone is the one that's, I left it in the car. It's one with me all the time. And I'll also give you my personal email. So you may grow weary of
to know us.
communication from us after a while. So.
You've already kind of touched on this, but I'll give you a chance to add to it if you want. Describe your marketing strategy for our search. Where will you post the position, and how do you leverage social media to attract candidates to Lawrence?
Yeah, well, we've kind of addressed that, but you know, we'll begin immediately, but we won't post the desired attributes and characteristics until after we've got them roughly right, in your opinion. And then we'll go back and update that as well. But we'll at least begin to get word out there right away that, guess what, there's an opportunity in Lawrence. And then once we get the desired attributes, then we'll be more aggressive in our actual recruitment on that. But, you know, all the others, the typical outlets that we would use, and I think the one that's a bit unique about HYA is that, you know, on our website now, it's the go-to place. I mean, we no longer just make it proprietary to the searches we're doing, which used to be the old way. Now we list everybody's.
So, multi-part question. How do you vet candidates? How frequently do you conduct background checks, and what do you check? Do you have updated background checks during our search for candidates with whom you've previously worked? And do you verify that the candidate has or can obtain a Kansas license if they're from another state?
Let me start the first part, and then.
All right.
So certainly, as applicants come in, we're talking to individuals who may know them. What do they say about them? What's their reputation? What's their work history, their work ethic? So there's that informal collegial networking that HYA provides and the number of associates who are working there. Obviously, candidates will be providing references in addition to their transcripts, letters of recommendation, all of which have names and contacts. So we're certainly in touch with those folks. Rather than just reading the letter and taking it for face value, we'll be talking to them individually. There's also another tier after that. Well, when you talk to a primary reference, well, who else might be someone good that we could talk with? Could you give me a name of someone who might know a little bit more about an area that you're discussing here? And so we'll take another cut at that, another deeper level, and contact that individual. So that hopefully we get down to a reasonable pool where we feel comfortable with an individual. Obviously, we'll be talking to them ourselves and conducting our own interview with these candidates firsthand. Ted has another even deeper aspect to discuss.
Once you've identified, maybe you've narrowed the field to 3, we highly recommend, this is the last document in your folder on the right-hand side, the last document is something provided by Baker Eubanks. It's a private investigative firm that we utilize. They will do everything that's listed on this sheet, which you'll find to be quite comprehensive. We also recommend that you utilize their media review. Print, electronic media is important, but what are they tweeting? What have they got out there on Facebook? And it's scanned looking for keywords, phrases, comments. That's very important in today's world, that be done. We highly recommend that you would do that.
Verifies degrees, verifies licenses,
Accreditation
credentials.
Accreditation of the university program, and then obviously all the criminal things. You'll find out if they have a trouble stopping at stop signs. You're going to get a complete credit review of financial history on the candidate. So it's very comprehensive, and we highly recommend that. The second part of your question had to do with certification. The Kansas certification is fairly normal. There are some nuances in it. Perhaps the biggest one is the completion of the praxis test, educational testing services for superintendents. And the reason I smile is I actually scored those tests for a number of years. I just retired from it a couple of years ago. So I don't want to drive out to Princeton or fly out to Princeton anymore. So I'm very familiar with that test. That's I think there are 11 or 12 states around the country that are still doing that. So that's a bit unique. Now, if you have somebody come in from outside of the state of Kansas, they'll likely need to complete that in order to get their certification. But quite candidly, for Lawrence, given the requirements on numbers of years of experience in administrative roles, teaching roles, et cetera, you're going to have candidates that for the most part are going to fit that, given that you're Lawrence, your size, your location, your reputation. The one thing is the ETS part, and we'll work with candidates on that.
You answered the question. I had a follow-up question. The Baker Eubanks, is that included in our?
That is an additional fee, if that's the question.
And then to follow, is this the only option that you have, or do you vet your own? Do you do your own?
That's the only one I'm aware of. I can ask the folks in the office if there are other options out there that you pursue.
Thank you.
I guess, can I follow up to that and ask, do you, you guys do some vetting before it gets to the point of hiring professionals that focus exclusively on that, right? So do you look at social media of candidates that you bring to us, or look at some of those other things prior to?
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Can you talk about that for a minute?
Sure. Yeah, well, Google crashes anytime you begin to mention a superintendent candidate's name in a community. So let's get out in front of that, and we do the same thing. I always go 10 pages deep on everybody that we even do a screening interview with, just to see what's out there. And then if there are things that roll up in those first 10 pages, whoa, what's going on here? Then we'll keep going and do a more refined search around an issue or something like that. The one question that we always ask every candidate when we do a screening interview with them, but the very last thing, and many times I'll say, now listen, I'm going to apologize to you, but I need to ask you this question, and I want you to give it some thought before you respond. Is there anything that would embarrass you or the school district if it was printed on the front page of the local newspaper? Most of the time, folks will say right away, they kind of giggle and say, no, but thanks for asking that question. Other times, they'll explain something. I can tell you a situation in a school district in northern Wisconsin, and I had a candidate who was a very good candidate for him, and he had been picked up for operating the snowmobile while under the influence the previous winter. And so I was presenting the slate of candidates, and I said to the school board, there were a 9-member school board, I said, now, you need to know something about this particular candidate. Here's the situation, in his words, that occurred. I laid it out for him. I said, now, if that's a showstopper, that's okay. Tell me. The candidate understands that. Silence. And finally, now you understand, northern Wisconsin. Finally, the one board member said, well, he's one of us. And so we went on. The candidate was in fact acceptable to him. Other communities, that's absolutely not.
Sometimes when we ask that question of a candidate, candidates of an approximate age when they were in college,
Yeah. We don't want to hear about it.
you know, might have gotten picked up for smoking pot.
Yeah, or underage.
And they'll say, I just want to tell you, when you go to do the background check, you're going to find this. Well, that's a smart thing to say right away, rather than not disclose it and have you be informed about it later. But it's something just to keep in your mind. That's kind of a generational thing that's starting to move its way forward. College kids do stuff.
And if there's a good
Well, no.
candidate, if there, what appears to be a very solid candidate coming forward, and there's something like that way back, you know, in the background somewhere, we'll let you know. We'll let you know ahead of time. And then you tell us, man, bring them forward, it's not a deal. Or, I don't know if that's going to work here in Lawrence. And secondary reference is also very important. John didn't talk a lot about it, but, you know, who else do you know? And then digging from there on the reference.
Great. My actual question, rather than my follow-up, was, and you've already said we actually will get to look at all the applications that are submitted, correct?
If you choose.
If you want.
Okay. They could be part of the portal. And then do we get to retain ownership of those materials if we choose?
You can print them out if your heart's content.
Okay.
You know, the call you might have is, well, Ted Blazing started the application, but didn't finish it. We can see that. John Pertut finished it, so now you can print out John's, but probably turning over someone who started and didn't finish it may not be appropriate for that candidate. They had a reason they stopped. You know.
Understanding these are confidential documents,
Right.
obviously.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, wear out the printer if you wish.
I think that you touched on this already early in your presentation, actually, because our board is in the situation where we will have 2 new board members starting in January. So sounds like, given that, you might have some recommendations about timing and how we conduct that search. Is there anything that you want to add to that you didn't already cover?
I don't believe so. You know, early on, again, to reemphasize, you're going to see a lot of us. You're going to hear a lot of us. I mean, we've got a lot of moving parts going on early on on the community engagement piece. And I would certainly encourage you to extend a special invitation to all of those folks who've stepped forward to be a candidate. And when we're here for those 2 days, it would be nice if we had a chance to meet with each of them as part of our interviewing. And then eventually, as we said, you're going to get all this back in a profile report and desired attributes on the schedule we've laid out. Then there's a pause. That's when we're recruiting. So you're going to be seeing and hearing a lot from us early on. Then all of a sudden we disappear, and you're saying, "Oh, geez, what happened to Ted? You know, I thought he had us on speed dial every other day here. What's going on?" Well, that's when we're out doing our recruiting. That's when the new board members will be seated. So then you kind of start into that interviewing phase after they're here. So that's what I've seen work. That's what we've had work.
And that's what's reflected in the timeline, the
Yeah.
draft, anyway, that we've given you.
But
I would
it's your
just,
call. I mean, if you want to finish this by New Year's Eve.
And did you say that you do an interviewing workshop with the board?
yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah. When we come back with the slate of candidates, the biggest portion of that meeting, quite candidly, the slate of candidates is almost anticlimactic. But the biggest portion of that meeting is the interview workshop. Now, prior to that, I have to tell you, prior to that, you're going to get a lengthy homework assignment from us with suggested questions, and we're going to want other questions from you, either preferences of those that we've suggested that are drawn from the desired attributes, desired characteristics, or your own questions. So that then we have all of that leading into the meeting. Otherwise, we're here sometimes till the sun comes up trying to decide on questions. So that's a key piece of the leadership, of the interview workshop. We'll talk about things to ask, things not to ask. We'll talk about reading candidates. And then we'll eventually wind up with a set of questions, much like you have this evening, where you each had a question. We'll wind up with a set of questions, and we'll assign those to each board member. And we'll ask you to rehearse those a little bit, as we all speak a little different, because you're going to want that first interview to be pretty much verbatim, same way for each of the candidates. Anyway, that's a little bit about
Shannon, just back to your point here on the candidates and the timeline here. I would just have a consideration for the candidate as board members change. This happened to me in my last position as a candidate, and a board hired me in December, and I arrived on July 1, and there were 3 new faces at the table. And it all worked out, fabulous board, but it's part of the transparency effort, I think, that we're trying to ensure, as well as you. And I think if we're upfront with everybody throughout the process, it shouldn't be a problem.
One final question about your guarantee. You said you have a guarantee on the search for a year. Can you give us any examples of a time when you've had to honor that guarantee?
in the first year? No. No. I've, those searches that I've led, others that I've worked on, of all the searches I've led, all of the appointments stayed in that position, most of them until they retired. With the exception of one. One left after 2 years and took a position in an international school. He's still there, by the way. But all the others were well beyond the guarantee spot.
Well, that is the end of our list of questions. Do board members have any additional questions? Vanessa?
One thing I think that the other presentations talked about a little bit that I don't remember hearing, but if you said it and I just wasn't listening, I apologize. Your support after the hiring, like board support, transition support, what is that like, and is that included or is that in addition?
There's a menu of services that are not included. However, what we do is once you've made your final selection, we broker a meeting with the newly appointed superintendent and the board members, just to go over things again. Okay, remember, this is what we heard. Remember, these were comments that came up, questions superintendent might have. I've done several workshops with boards and new superintendents where we laid out goals, talked about first-year evaluation. How do we know we're successful in 3 years as opposed to 6? What are those first year's objectives we want you to work on, that kind of stuff.
But other features include strategic planning, board workshop, board governance workshop, evaluations, all are additional cost fees. Same 2 people if you wanted.
Great.
Might be tired of us by then.
Might be tired of us by then, who knows?
Great. Well, that's all the questions we have then, and we thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you for your
Appreciate it.
service again. Best of luck to
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so that was a lot of information. I want to take everybody's temperature at this point about whether people feel comfortable with going into a discussion about and voting on selecting a firm tonight, or if you would like some time to sit with all of this and think about it and come back and discuss it at the September 11 meeting. That obviously affects our timeline in terms of when we start and how quickly we roll. But we did get a lot of additional materials from a couple of the firms tonight that we hadn't seen before.
So if we did want some more time, when would the next meeting be?
September 11 will be our next meeting, unless we decided as a group to try to call a special meeting before then.
Right, I think we have a couple choices that we need to make. One is which firm we want to go with, and then two, I think we need to make the timely decision. And I think we've received a lot of feedback from various people about how that might look, but I think that's critical and that needs to happen around the same time that we're hiring a firm, because we can't really hit the ground running without that.
Okay. Speak up, folks.
I feel like, I know we've had several special meetings, but I don't feel like I can make a decision right now.
You want some time to review materials and come back? I mean, I feel like that's very reasonable. I guess then the next question would be, do we want to try to do a special meeting early next week, or do we want to hold this till September 11?
I think I'd prefer a special meeting. I'm not able to attend the September 11 meeting,
Okay.
but certainly if the will of the board is to go ahead and have it, I could set my comments if that matters.
Would it make sense to talk about the other issue, the timeline? Because if we're talking about a timeline and we're going to start, or we're going to shoot for doing it second semester, that would also,
Sure.
it would change the timeline on the decision.
So I'll just throw out my thoughts about that. Based on everything that they've said and some of the feedback that I've gathered in some informal conversations with people outside of the interviews this evening, I'm comfortable with pushing the timeline a little bit so that we're doing a little more of the work after Christmas. I think that a timeline where we're doing all of the public input and creating the pool before Christmas and then doing the interviewing and selecting after Christmas is reasonable. And I feel comfortable based on what I've heard from other people that we aren't going to be losing out on candidates if we do it that way. And in fact, in some cases, I've had a couple of people say, wow, if you guys try to hire before Christmas, you might be too early because people aren't really ready to make that decision just yet. So that's...
So Shannon, can I clarify? So you do think that narrowing the pool prior to the holidays is important, or
I don't know.
waiting? Oh,
I
okay.
think waiting.
Okay.
I think it would be okay to do that work in January and then target interviews in early February for the finalists.
Public input, maybe we could
Being before
knock
Christmas.
down, gathered prior to
Right.
semester break.
Right.
I think that makes sense. I think it's.
But I'm also open to disagreement on that. So, I mean, what do people think?
I think if I had any other option to that, to add to it, I think it would be fine if we narrowed it down to sort of the 8 to 12 range and then kicked it to the turn of the year and had the new board sort of select the top 3 that we interviewed. But again, that might just with whatever search firm we choose, that might not be sort of exactly how they do it. So I think that's just going to be dependent upon the firm more than anything else.
Let me ask this. Is there anybody who feels very strongly that we need to wrap this up before December 31st? Okay, then I don't see any reason why taking some time reviewing all of this stuff in greater detail and then coming back would be problematic to our schedule. Then the question is just, do we do a special meeting the 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th? Maybe the 5th? No, you teach on Tuesday nights.
Do.
So, okay. What about Wednesday the 6th?
Great, I can make it work if it works for everybody else.
So are we talking about the regular 7 o'clock time? Is that?
We could, if that works. That probably works better for Melissa.
6, yeah.
Or 6,
7.
okay.
Are we definitely doing goal setting on the 11th?
Yes.
Okay.
So that means we're going to be meeting at 5, correct? Starting at 5 on the 11th. And, perhaps by the time we've all had time to kind of sift through this, the decision-making process will go a little more quickly. So maybe that won't be
I mean, is there a benefit to making the decision on the 6th or audit remain? I mean, that's not that much sooner than the 11th. Should we do it on the 11th?
except for you said you're going to be gone.
Right.
You could send.
We've met our quota of special meetings. So.
I was remarking earlier today that I don't think we've ever had an August, I don't know if we've ever had a month where we had 4 board meetings like this in a 2-week, 3-week time period, but we've been very busy. What was that? Some.
Vanessa, how comfortable are you with the information you have in terms to provide that input without having the chance to discuss it and be part of the process?
You know, and I'm actually looking, the issue I have on the 11th is at 8 o'clock, so I could be here for the goal setting session and then the first part of that.
We could set this as like the first
Right.
beginning of the meeting so that you could be sure to
I mean, I
participate.
do
in
have
part
some
of it.
thoughts, so I definitely have opinions. They're not super well crafted.
David, there's no problem in setting up the order of the agenda so that we could do goal setting and then have, after consent, have this be the first item that we deal with. I mean, usually we do voting business at the end, but.
You have control of your agenda, so there would be no
Okay.
issue with that.
All right.
Okay, yeah, then I'm comfortable with that plan. Is everyone
Okay.
comfortable with that plan? Yes.
I think that's a good idea. All right, so we will then, David, if you could let the firms know that we've decided they provided us so much information that we felt we needed some additional time to review and contemplate, and we will be making our decision at the September 11th meeting.
As you look at each of the firms in terms of their initial calendars that they proposed, they would all like to do something in September. So as long as you're suited up and ready to begin working between the 11th and your next board meeting, they may want to do board interviews in that 2-week time frame or have some information exchange with the board members. So I don't think any of them want to wait until October to begin working on it.
Right. So then with that in mind, if everyone would please look at their calendars for that week after September 11th and the following week, and maybe send to Dawn if you have any, immovable conflicts for a time to meet with them outside of our regular board meeting. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions, concerns? David, if in this process, as people are reviewing their information, they have a particular question that remains unanswered, should they send that directly to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Send it to me, and then I can inquire. Your question that you
About the lead consultant.
the
for Ray.
contact, Ryan, Gloria, and Brenda would be the 3 people that would
Okay.
kind of co-chair the.
Okay, so
lead,
they're not planning to have just one person be the main interface, it would be all 3 of them?
all 3
Okay.
of those would be the 3 that are
Okay.
main. Ralph would be available, as I understand it, but he's not going to be one of the point people, if you will.
We realized that we didn't really ask Ray to specify if they had a particular point person out of their team of 4. So we wanted to it's okay, no, it's okay. We just wanted to make sure that we got.
Thanks, Jill.
That we got an answer to that, because we had talked about that being something important, to know who the people would be that we would be directly working with.
I had another question, and that was, did either of you do the phone calls
Yes.
to kind of,
Thank you for the reminder. Jessica and I did make phone calls, and in a couple cases, I actually talked to some people in person that I happened to see last weekend at a KSB event. So generally speaking, we got all good references for all 3 of the firms, of all the people that we talked to. There was not anything that was raised as a concern that would be a red flag.
great, thanks for doing that.
Sure. No problem. Thank you to Jessica for helping out with that. Appreciate it.
Can you talk about the social media vetting that you did?
I did not troll their Facebook pages. Okay. With that, I think then we are at the end of our agenda, so motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.